Good morning and welcome to the 2023 Brookmount Explorations Incorporated year-end conference call. On the call today, we have Rodney Johnston from Fast Pitch IR, Nils Olquist, CEO of Brookmount, Aaron Kimball, Executive Director of Global Operations at Brookmount, and myself, Jeff Pittman, also from Fast Pitch IR. We appreciate all shareholders and prospective shareholders tuning into this call, those listening live and those listening later. To note, the call is being recorded and will be available on Brookmount's webpage, brookmountgold.com, shortly after the end of this call. Regarding questions for management, please send your questions via direct message to Brookmount's X inbox. We will review questions and select a few to ask later in the call. With that introduction, I'll turn it over to Rodney Johnston. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the call. We have a lot to unpack here. Again, my name is Rodney Johnston, President of Fast Pitch IR. We have a lot to unpack here, so I appreciate you joining us. First, we want to take the time to introduce to you Aaron Kimball, and he's been part of Brookmount Gold for just about 3 years now, and we thought this would be a great opportunity for him to kind of digress a little bit about his background, his education, and sort of his work as a geologist. So with that, Aaron Kimball, go ahead and feel
Hi.
free to give some background about your work.
Okay. Thanks for that introduction, Rodney. Yes, as Rodney mentioned, I'm exploration geologist. Kind of came out of the University of Alberta a couple decades ago. I started my first real job up in the Klondike in the Yukon, in Dawson City, Yukon, and did a number of years. It's gold and precious metal and base metal exploration for a number of years. And then that kind of transitioned when gold hit a real low in the late '90s. Transitioned into some oil sand projects for the next 10 to 15 years. But all along, keeping my interests in gold and mining and exploration, and even the oil sand projects I was involved in. We were unique because we explored for oil sands. We weren't rehashing old leases or anything like that. So we actually were able to add over 10 billion barrels of bitumen to the oil sands deposits on various projects. So that was a unique and interesting time. And then still continued on, obviously, with gold, copper, and stuff like I mentioned, and over the years on various projects. And that has really brought us back here to the last kind of couple of years here with Brookmount, getting things set up here. Because over that time, I was able to kind of keep my hands on and acquire kind of a stable of properties that I feel are high quality and near-term production, and that kind of fit really well with our plans here at Brookmount once we kind of joined forces with Mr. Olquist.
Great, thank you, Aaron. I think that part where the two of you, you and Niels have been working together for several years, and I think the investors and investor community would like to sort of have you digress or go into a little bit more deeper understanding about some of the properties that you've been working with over the course of the 35 years that you've been a geologist. And it's my understanding these properties with this new spinoff, with this new company, North American Gold Company, it sounds to me like these are sort of hand-picked properties that you have some background and history on, that you have really earmarked for exploration or at least production. Can you go into a little bit more detail about some of the aspects that you really like about these properties?
Yes, the first being Yukon property. It it's really unique. It's got a very I'll say established high grade at around 13, 14 grams a ton. It is a small scale past producer in both placer and hard rock. and having that combination for us to quickly get started has been unique. So it originally started out like most gold production in the Yukon as a placer mine, but over the years along the side of the hill, the vein was uncovered and is uncovered today, and that's kind of going to be our starting point. So. In the past, I've been able to delineate this vein in several areas and get a small resource that is 43101 compliant, and that's roughly around 40,000 ounces. But we've got modeled numbers well in excess, reaching up to 100,000. So it's going to be pretty quick for us to increase this resource and get it 43101 compliant. And still this 100,000 ounces is still relatively small on a hard rock scale, but the potential of this property is quite strong, with lots of exposed near surface gold drill targets, and more than just drill targets, kind of delineating products to quickly add and increase to what we would consider some production numbers. So there's an established infrastructure at this site. We have an airstrip. There's a camp. There's equipment on site already. So it's really a turnkey type of operation that we'll be able to quickly get started. And that's one of the things that we've been kind of making sure that's part of Neil's and I's strategy, is like we want to get established resources and get into production as fast as we can. So adjacent to this is the MacArthur Creek property, and because this property is divided by, or the two properties are bound by the Alaska Yukon border. So the continuation of this deposit is MacArthur Creek. So that's basically property number two, and it allows us access that is more direct to the property to bring supplies in and work both properties at the same time. It also is an operating and has had past placer production and stuff. So it's just a great fit to the whole region in this area. Our third one that we are working on is in the Atlan district, and it's an old operating mine that was shut down in the mid or in the early 1900s, with established reserves in the ground. So that one we'll be doing more work on it, but there's has been, again, it was a past producer, and that's kind of the focus for us, is when we're looking at reevaluating our properties. That we do kind of frequently is, was it in production? Was it economic? And if we apply that type of mining that was done in the past, would it be economic today? And obviously we're checking off all those boxes, and that's why we're both kind of really excited. And obviously where gold's headed, where we all think the gold is happening. It's a pretty fun time to get started in this industry.
Aaron, can you talk a little bit more about some of the crews that you have run in the past? I've heard numbers as high as hundreds of crew people working on different projects. Can you provide us a background of your experience with maybe one or two of your top projects that you've managed?
Uh, sure. I guess uh, with any of the exploration projects, we're usually starting small, and we have just a handful of guys going into build roads and establish a camp and access. But once we get going and drills come in, or other infrastructure that's needed for the project, it quickly grows. So yes, with the oil sand projects, that it quickly went, literally from 4 people to 75 people over the course of a couple months, and then over a 3-year period, we maxed out at over 300 people on site, developing one of the oil sand projects. So to be able to go through that transition of growth and management of I guess all the people on site and different contracts and everybody on site is for me has been a wonderful experience and very valuable experience in the same line.
Great. We talked a little bit about the 43101 report that was available and done. Actually, I think you were the one that did some of that legwork. And before we move over to Niels to explain more about the new company and the reason why we're going to be merging into a ticker is can you share with us a little bit of the specifics about the 43101, which would provide some validation about these deposits that you're very confident of. Tell us a little bit about the history first of all, and then a few aspects of the 43101.
Okay. The property was first, the Yukon property was first kind of discovered in 1976 and has been worked through placer and operation and small scale hard rock production in the mid 90s. But when I first personally started working the property in 2004 and was active in 2006 and 7 with some drilling. It was important for us when we're evaluating the resources, because this is now a post Bre-X environment, and so validating your resources third party is just kind of the norm. So we were able to do a drill program with the right drill spacing in order to basically establish a small resource. And this part, it was important because it's shallow and near surface, so we knew we could get started at some scale, um, economically, and then grow from there. So we wanted to have it, properly modeled in all aspects for pit design and where we're going to put the waste, and as well as obviously the gold in place. And through that at a small scale, a lot of our original kind of gold in place kind of gets restricted because it's a one time kind of model that's done. But there's well over 100,000 ounces in place from that 43101. But as the pit grows, then we capture the increased ounces and stuff. So. The report itself, we chose Stantec. This was important just to, they're a top tier engineering company, and very active in both mining and oil and gas. So to have their team come in and look at this and be excited about it as well. And they were on site doing the work, taking samples and resamples, evaluating the core, and all aspects of what would make this project viable. They're all components of that 43-101. They gave us a very competent list of recommendations and a work plan to help guide us, and that's kind of where our kind of starting point is now on to move forward with the project.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. It sounds to me like there's production levels that can be increased based on where we start, and so you have some tailings there in McArthur Creek that can bring in revenues right away, and then you've got some of the deeper resources that can be extracted over time to really bring in those large sums of revenue that investors are looking for. Um, at this point, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Niels to talk about the structure and the new company itself for North American Coal that's going to be merged into, or at least brought into the fold. And with that, Niels, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rodney, and thanks, Aaron, for that summary. And I mean, you and I have talked many a long night about this. Basically, one of our strategies, one key corporate strategy, has been to produce the first ounce of gold out of North America, which will make a lot of difference to the perception and the position of the company. And so to get back to Rodney's comment about the restructuring or the spin-off, or call it what you will, what the board decided was that it would make sense to compartmentalize the North American assets and make them self-sustaining, while still remaining as a part of the Brookmount umbrella. So we looked around and we thought hard and decided that the best way to do this would be to bring in, excuse me, another public vehicle which would acquire those assets, and that public vehicle would be owned in proportion to the existing shareholders of all the existing shareholders of Brookmount. In other words, it would be a subsidiary of Brookmount owned by Brookmount shareholders. And there were two reasons for this. One, the compartmentalization means that we can focus, and Erin has long talked to me about this, setting up a structure whereby we could create audits of these three operations separately, all of which are relatively straightforward because they're non-producing properties at this point. And we would then use those properties to secure non-equity based, in other words, non-dilutive financing to assist in the development to get past the initial production into full production. So that would not put any pressure on the shareholders to be diluted to fund that process, and that was attractive. So this the structure is pretty well set. We have identified, as I've mentioned in communications earlier, we have identified the vehicle, which we've sat down and worked out a deal. We've signed a deal with them. We're not prepared to disclose details at this point because, as you know, we are in registration process with the SEC for Regulation A financing, the proceeds of which will be used largely to go into both the acquisition of the public vehicle and the push into the initial production, most likely at the Yukon property. So the strategy was really created to both provide a funding and a business line for the North American assets separate from Indonesia, and also to bring in an amplification of the value of Brookmount through the consolidation of the U.S. company's business into Brookmount's balance sheet. So that will add value to everybody. So quite apart from Brookmount shareholders receiving a special dividend of shares in North American Gold, the value of Brookmount shares should be enhanced by the fact that North American Gold is also a publicly traded subsidiary. So I think it's a win-win, and we're very excited about getting past this registration stage, which we anticipate. SEC you can never really predict, but I think within 30 days we should have that process completed, and then we will proceed with closing the merger of the U.S. vehicle, and also start to create channels of funding to bring production up in both McArthur Creek and the Yukon property. And I think as Aaron, and you might want to comment on this, Aaron, we've talked about once you produce the ore, or once you process the ore, you have a product which can be refined into a final product. So technically, and you could comment on this, Aaron, that we've got a plan, or we have a possibility that we can do our own refining in conjunction with local operators in Canada, correct?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And looking at it, especially at the scale that we'll be mining at or producing at, to be able to, I guess, enhance the quality and the purity of our gold is kind of the goal. And it's there's manageable, I guess, systems that that are it's relatively easy to do and get it set up. and stuff. So I think that's going to be a definitely value added component of this project
Mm.
is basically producing, a four nines type of gold,
Right.
that comes out of this stuff with, we'll get a nice emblem and stuff, be able to stamp our bars and
We basically created
have some
investment.
good gold.
We created an investment product, which
Yes.
downstream gives you a much wider coverage, a much broader audience, and I think is something that we've been talking about for a long time. So basically, this is the point that we've reached. A lot of work, a lot of effort the last 2 years has gone into this, and I think that that we're sort of poised at this point. Halfway through the registration process to get funding that will enable us to close everything that we've discussed and everything that Aaron's talked about, including ultimately producing Brookmount gold, 4 nines purity gold, which will be a real, it puts us in a different category. So that's really my take on where we are with the spin-off and the restructuring. We have a trip across to Indonesia this week with one of our major shareholders and directors who will be viewing the Indonesian operations, and we will be planning on getting that takeover agreement signed as well. So, we're working hard with Indonesia to bring it into conformity with the way we will be operating in North America, and that would mean that Aaron will run North America with Brookmount's guidelines, Brookmount staff, Brookmount standards, and so forth. And to date, we haven't been able to do that in Indonesia because we've had a joint venture which called for the joint venture partner to run the business. From the date that we agree and fund this acquisition of the additional shares, then we become the sole owner of that property, as I mentioned in some of the releases, and then we can standardize the operations as within Brookmount, between Asia and the US. So that's really where we are, Rodney.
Great background. Thank you for explaining. I think a lot of investors have been following the Brookmount story. Maybe uh, had some questions or had some just was curious about this new company and the spinoff. And I think you did a great job of explaining what the strategy is. And I certainly do appreciate the vertical integration of both North America and Indonesia. I think there's a lot of value added there. So at this point, I think we can turn it over to any questions that people listening might have. Jeff Pittman has been taking those questions on his Twitter.
Yes, thanks, Rodney. I just received a message from Bob saying financials. Probably, Bob, we're not going to really dive into the financials today. That we're going to keep the scope of the call primarily North American Gold spinoff and the vehicle that we're going to be acquiring. I see, Bob. The follow up question is audit. So actually, that's great that you asked that. We are
Yes.
planning Nils, if I have it right, we're
Yes.
planning a follow-on call
Correct.
post the Monado meeting.
Correct. We've got we'll be updating everybody with respect to all those questions. The joint venture, the opera, because we have another quarter almost behind us already after the end of the year in November, because we're November year end. And also the ever-present issue of the audit, which we'll be addressing, and I think people will be comfortable with that. So yes, I understand that there is anxiety and there are questions and so forth, but we will be setting up, as you said, Jeff, a conference call immediately we return from Indonesia, which will be, I'd say we would set it for 2 weeks.
Okay, excellent. Great. So everyone listening, kind of plan for that. We'll
Yes.
likely meet here on X Spaces just as we are currently.
Yes.
Let's see. Quality and Color had any chance of buyback? I assume that's a share buyback. That's probably to be determined, I would imagine.
I think there was also probably people had questions about the 8 million shares which were being returned to Treasury, and that's in process. But right now, unfortunately, as we're in the registration period, we can't progress any significant changes in capital until the registration is effective. So, and the same would be said for a buyback. Ultimately, if we, and to be honest, Quality and Color, I understand the question, and I totally understand where it's coming from. But if I have, if Aaron, and he can decide, if he has spare capital, he's probably going to put it into production rather than share buybacks, because I think production will do. It has a long-term benefit to the business and ultimately to the shareholders, which a buyback is just a short-term issue, which doesn't really, has a short-term effect, but doesn't give you any long-term benefit in particular. So that at the stage we are as a I suppose junior miner is a term that people use. I'm not sure I agree with it, but as a relatively small mining company, I think capital is reserved for expansion, for development, and particularly for production, because we've got some low-hanging fruit in the North American properties, which we would be amiss if we didn't pursue. And I think Aaron would beat me up if I told him we were doing a buyback instead of putting money into getting Moose Horn and these others into production.
Sure. Okay. Bob had a follow-on question. Disclose major investors. I don't know if that would be appropriate, Bob. Yeah, I would likely that we'd probably pass by that one.
Well, I mean, all of our filings on OTC markets at the moment, presumably after we become reporting, we'll be filing SEC, much more stringent and disciplined reporting standards. But I do believe that we have a list of key shareholders in that on the OTC filings.
Excellent. Okay. And then just a question here about a timeline of anticipated uplist. Now that's kind of TBD. I would imagine.
I think, yeah, I don't really want to address that now, because the timeline will all hang around. Will all be gauged around a number of key points, break points. And I think we'll be in a better position to talk about that at the next call. This call
Definitely.
really was designed for a précis on the US, on the North American assets, and to introduce everyone to Aaron, who's worked very hard behind the scenes on this for a couple of years and deserves his moment in the sun.
Excellent.
We'll be front and center in the US North American side.
Excellent. Okay. Given that, I think we've covered pretty much all the questions. Any final comments from Aaron or Nils? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Aaron, just want to say thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. No, though, thanks for the attendance and the interest in our projects, and looking forward here to this obviously getting active and progressing this summer.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you, and Rodney and Jeff, thank you for organizing this. But I do appreciate people taking interest in us and supporting us very much. And I'm confident that this, what we're going through, this process we're going through at the moment, it may be unclear to some, or it may have been unclear to some at the beginning as to what the effect was going to be and why we were doing it and so forth. But I think you will see the effect when we do close, and you look at the consolidation impact of the two companies being together, and widening our shareholder base, and of course then the next steps involving uplisting and so forth will be driven from that base on a much more successful matrix, I think, than had we just continued the way we were.
Excellent. Thank you, Nils. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Rodney, for moderating or asking questions. All right, this concludes the 2023 Brookmount Explorations Incorporated year-end conference call. As a reminder, the recording of this call will be uploaded to brookmountgold.com for replay. We appreciate your time and interest and wish you all the best. You may now disconnect.